the big difference, what is enabling the Czechs to keep going, and I think it has a very good chance of becoming the kind of model for Europe, is that they're not talking about cannabis as a standalone item at all. What they're doing is making it a one pillar of a new government-approved harm reduction strategy that is part of overall public health to reduce negative outcomes.
Checking it out. While Germany, the Netherlands and Belgium continue to make all of the right noises around legalising recreational cannabis, they may yet be beaten to the punch by the Central European neighbour, the Czech Republic, or Czechia. We speak to Sean Carney, founder and executive director at Herbology Ventures based in Prague, about the moves being made. And hello and welcome to the Lobsterpot podcast. I'm Dave Barton, the co-founder and creative director of Thermidor, and there's another man who does a similar thing at Thermidor, although he is the how would I say it now? He's the man that makes my dreams come true. I come up with the stupid ideas that we should put together, and he can actually make them into a thing. So that's why we're a great duo. Wouldn't you say so, Mr. Jamie?
Hey, I'll take that. I'll definitely take it. If I make your dreams come true, Dave, that's something I can check off my list. I appreciate that.
Just don't tell my wife, but it is true. But speaking of dreams come true, this is a nice segue into our guest. I'm sorry, Sean. Good to see you, sir. Sean Carney, we have the founding executive director of Herbology Ventures in Prague in the Czech Republic. Good to see you, sir. How are you doing today?
Great. Hello, Dave, Jamie, and everyone. Nice to be with you.
Excellent. So tell us a little more. I mean, we hear lots about Czech Republic. It's almost kind of like everyone in Europe is waiting for Germany to come online as regards kind of recreational cannabis. There's lots of kind of things in motion, but it feels like it's a bit of a, what do we call it? Like a Leviathan kind of mammoth task to actually get Germany to kind of get things in motion. So it's almost like the smaller countries are already seeing it. We're already seeing kind of like a Luxembourg and come online and things like that, and Czech Republic too. Is that kind of so tell us more. It's a really interesting time to be in your part of the world.
Yeah, it sure is. The cannabis kind of regulation, on the European continent, there's been a long kind of arc, a long push, but it really and the Czechs have always wanted to legalize. The Czech Republic is one of the biggest, home to the biggest populations of cannabis users in Europe.
Is that right?
Like on a per capita basis, with usage in life or regular usage and so on. So it's really kind of a heavy cannabis community, and they've wanted to legalize for a long time, but they've always said we have to let Germany take the first steps because they're the big boy and we'll wait. So then last year, when in October, when the German coalition government kind of announced a framework, including a commercial element, that finally, that's what the Czechs were waiting for, and they said, and we're doing it too. Of course, the Germans have since kind of backtracked, scaled it down a little for whatever reasons, but the Czechs have said, well, the Germans already broke the ice. We're moving forward, full steam ahead.
And it's really interesting. I mean, I think that. Do you not think that the Czech Republic could kind of do it without kind of Germany's almost? It feels like that has almost started the ball rolling in Europe. The whole Germany move. Obviously, it's good. It's the biggest sort of market in the EU, but it's almost without sort of Germany almost setting that precedent. Do you think a lot of countries, including Czech Republic, wouldn't be embracing kind of rec legalization as openly?
Yeah, no, that's really important for kind of setting the stage in terms of what's acceptable for governments to kind of talk about in public policy. So once the Germans said, okay, this is a policy goal, we want to do it, and then they worked on it for a while, and then since have scaled back, citing like EU pushback, but without providing anything really concrete. They never put the legalization bill to Parliament. They're now doing it, but the scaled back version. So while they are kind of reducing the scope, they made it palatable for governments and just general populations in Europe that, oh, cannabis legalization is something that's kind of doable. At least we can talk about it and not be tarred and feathered.
Do you think that the Czech Republic, or maybe any other country in Europe that's looking to do it, will be able to avoid some of that watering down? It's almost like the precedent that Germany are able to set if they kind of go through with what they're doing at the moment, which is a watered down version of what it was 12, 18 months ago.
The old two-pronged approach thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, well, I agree with Jamie on that it creates a situation like, oh, well, do we all have to step back because the Germans stepped back? But there's one major difference between what the Germans have done and the Czechs, and really every other country in Europe that's trying to get towards adult use, which also includes Malta, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Luxembourg primarily, plus late to the game, Portugal. All the other countries except the Czech Republic are talking about legalization or regulation as a standalone item. Like, we want to legalize, that's this point. But then you're exposed to attacks from all angles, all sides, and that's exactly what happened in Germany. So because they said we want to legalize or regulate it, whatever you want to call it, and then there was pushback because then immediately, supposedly, the Europeans said, "Oh, here's this issue. Stop, hold on, it's going too far, et cetera, et cetera." The big difference, what is enabling the Czechs to keep going, and I think it has a very good chance of becoming the kind of model for Europe, is that they're not talking about cannabis as a standalone item at all. What they're doing is making it a one pillar of a new government-approved harm reduction strategy that is part of overall public health to reduce negative outcomes. So it also includes this strategy that's now been approved by the Czech cabinet. Also includes measures to reduce youth alcohol consumption, smoking, have greater education into kind of addictive behaviors in general. There's an element on gambling to reduce gambling because that's considered here like a health socio kind of risk. And cannabis regulation is one part of that. So the logic is that the Czechs say, we want to improve public health and reduce expenditure on negative outcomes. People ending up in the hospital or in some addiction clinics. So the way to do that is by having education and regulating things. So the Czech model is saying that by having a strictly regulated adult use cannabis market, including sales and dispensaries, we will be able to better monitor the situation, better control what people are using and behaviors. And so it makes it, even though the Germans backtrack on their kind of standalone item, it's going to be it's easy for the EU to say, hey, slow down on that point. But with the Czechs creating a harm reduction strategy that is in line with the EU law and in line with the UN Single Convention, which is about promoting the welfare of mankind or humankind, it's a lot harder for any kind of overarching institutions to push back.
No, that's really interesting that it can come in such a much broader Trojan horse. We talk about the Trojan horse in cannabis from med to rec, but it's interesting, and I think it makes a huge amount of sense. We're seeing countries across Europe, across the world, looking at harm reduction, both from what's good for people, but also what's good for the bottom line in terms of what it can cost. And we have lots of different places. Scotland at the moment are looking at opening open centres. I think they've just opened one open centre for safe drug consumption in Glasgow, I believe. And it's that same sort of line. And I think as soon as people are able to see the benefits of it, it becomes a lot more palatable.
Yeah, it sure does. And just as a matter of fact, this is kind of interesting. Just in late September, members of lawmakers and some people from some government institutions from Germany, the Netherlands, Czech Republic, Luxembourg, and Malta met in Malta to discuss cannabis, but they didn't talk about cannabis regulation. They talked about harm reduction. And this is the first time that this kind of group of like-minded countries has got together specifically under the banner of harm reduction. They have met several times over the last 2 years, but it was on cannabis regulation policy options. This is the first time where they're getting together to say, let's talk about harm reduction. So it shows that people are learning, well, if we do it in this from this angle, we can actually get traction and move forward to kind of promote rational cannabis policy.
Absolutely. So what's the kind of legal status of cannabis generally within the Czech Republic right now? I mean, is it medical legal, or is it, where are we at right now with it?
Yeah, medical's been legal since 2013. It's kind of modestly growing. For medical, the state now pays 90% of the monthly cost. So that kind of helped. The cannabis itself for adult use has been decriminalized since 2010, but it's been kind of murky waters. Originally, it was set out very clearly in late 2009, what constitutes like personal use, like 5 plants and stuff like this. Then subsequently, the Czech courts and the justice in general has said, well, no, that exact definition doesn't apply across the board. So people are still getting prosecuted and locked in jail, and lives kind of disrupted by the prohibitionists.
No, I mean, because it's like from a sort of, so I guess you said, earlier we were talking, you mentioned around, there's a fairly broad, consumption kind of community within the Czech Republic. I mean, are people, of all kind of ages and sort of generations kind of consumers? Is there a particular demographic, do you think, or do you think it's just kind of broadly just accepted by everyone, but kind of on a kind of anecdotal basis, just to kind of understand what it's like out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's cannabis is kind of just commonplace in all the normal places, but what's really interesting is here there's a very significant population of senior citizens that are cannabis growers, and they don't grow it like in indoor tents, growing skunk. Well, because in the Czech Republic, it's pretty common to have a weekend house or a cottage, something like that, and like 1 out of every 3, tops 4 senior citizen has a couple plants growing in the garden. And then what they typically do with this is they make topicals from it for, achy joints and stuff like that. So they're not like smoking it and getting high. However, they're really at peace with it. They're not fighting it. So once someone's grandparents are comfortable with the idea that cannabis is normal, it makes it easier for their children, who are like today's parents, to understand it. So it's really kind of throughout the whole society, it's common. I mean, of course, there's certain demographics and pockets where it's still not used, but generally it's pretty widespread, and it's not especially frowned on. What is frowned on is the kind of Wild West that exists now with no regulation. A lot of psychoactive substances are sold now in vending machines. This is like a phenomenon, yeah. So, but which leads us right to the point where the Czechs, in addition to regulating cannabis, there's one bill that was just introduced to Parliament last week for actual discussion this autumn. There's another bill to regulate something called psychomodulatory substances, which is like everything that's kind of cannabis related, but falls outside of cannabis. So it's all these different analogs and these, semi-synthetic cannabinoids and all
kind of HHC type stuff. And
HHC and stuff like that. Exactly.
Okay. I mean, what's the kind of attitude on that? Because I've seen that's been banned in a number of different European countries, hasn't it? HHC in particular.
Yeah, and that wave is coming. But interestingly, it was also stopped by the Czechs, which is an indicator for everybody who's a cannabis entrepreneur that there is a EU state where the government is holding firm. Because what happened after the Germans scaled back, what was it, like March, I think? Then in April, May, there was an effort in the Czech Republic to prohibit CBD, saying we have to enforce the novel food regulations. So then what happened is the European Industrial Hemp Association, along with Czech Hemp, which is like the Czech trade industry group, they informed the government, the Czech coalition government, on the historic uses of hemp extract. And then the Czech government said, actually, this is a traditional food. We're not going to ban it. And then 2 months later, right at the beginning of the summer, there was an effort to prohibit HHC for all the normal reasons. Then the government, and there was a really short timeline. They wanted to do it from July 1st. But the government also, spoke with the, Czech Hemp Trade Group, also addiction, specialists, doctors, trade groups, and so on. And they said prohibition won't solve anything. There'll be another workaround. And they said we're going to regulate it. So then they finally, in August, formally approved the cabinet the cannabis regulation bill and the psychomodulatory regulation bill. And just last week, both of these were put on the agenda for the Czech Parliament's autumn session. So, and the goal is to have this debated by Christmas, and it looks like that is on track to happen.
I guess speaking maybe a little bit more broadly, and you can decide whether or not to get your crystal ball out, or if it's something you have a line on. But what do you see kind of playing out in Czechia in the next kind of 6 months, 12 months? And do you think it will be? We've spoken about it ultimately being led by what Germany does. It's almost the big brother takes the big step kind of thing. But what do you see happening in those next 6 to 12 months?
Sure. Well, what is almost guaranteed now is that home growing will be legalized, which then means the starting material needs to be legally available and not as a souvenir. Currently, seeds are sold like as souvenirs. So that will be legalized. And it's really likely that social clubs will be legalized, but unlike in Germany, where they're just like group cultivation, but with no on-site consumption, the Czech plan calls for having on-site consumption, as well as having the cannabis equivalent of a beer garden. Both of those look really likely, simply because Germany is already kind of working in that general direction. So those are pretty good to go. And then for the actual cannabis legalization or regulation, it's still not a done deal. However, the Czech Parliament's internal analysis group, which analyzes bills for their compliance with EU law, just last week, also at the time when these bills were introduced to Parliament, released their findings, which said that these bills are largely in line with EU law, and there's just a little more detail needed in a few areas, and then they need to notify the EU, but the notification procedure. But the notification is not necessarily what the Germans did. What the Germans did was pre-notification. They went to the EU and said, please, will you allow us to even introduce this to the Parliament? So they kind of, in my view, and in view of some observers, their heart wasn't really in it, or maybe the Bavarian, CDU party just was going to say no, and they knew it, so they wanted a way out. But so where we are, Jamie, 6 months from now, home growing should be either legal or well on the way to being legal. Social clubs, very likely. And then for a commercial market, that's still up in the air. But there is one kind of risk to this scenario, and that's this psychomodulatory bill. And it's kind of taking some of the wind out of the sails of cannabis regulation, because the cannabis legalization thing's been going on for years, decades. And then, it's getting really close. And then just last year, suddenly HHC is on the scene. And so now that's become like an vending machines. And so now they're kind of dealing with this in a priority way. And there is a possibility that this psychomodulatory bill could be approved. Then there has to be some analysis, what products should be on the list, and then that they will say, and we'll deal with cannabis after we get this psychomodulatory thing set up. So it could be a way for the government to kick the can down the road. However, there's going to be Czech parliamentary elections next year, and the current government probably won't win the elections, and they know it. And they're steadfast in trying to establish really kind of concrete structural changes in the Czech Republic to make it, more modern, more European, and so forth. It has something to do with European cooperation, NATO, all this stuff, with the war in Russia. But they want to get the cannabis stuff done. So it's a real toss-up when it'll happen. But they're going to discuss it. It's not going to just dilly-dally forever, because all the politicians know that it needs to get done. And one last thing, Jamie and Dave, and whoever's listening, the Czech opposition parties in parliament have been in the last couple of years using obstruction to just stop bills from moving to parliament. And they're doing this like on like some economic reform bills, which, you know, it won't help their electorate. But just last week, when these bills were introduced to the parliament on the agenda for the autumn, the opposition said, we're not going to object. We're not going to block it. We're going to let it flow through. So really, we're still on track to having these things potentially go through parliament by the end of the year, which would be the first EU country to discuss actually like dispensary type legalization, no matter what you want to call it, in parliament. And the president, there's a new president who's also very pro-European for the last year. And he's said if the parliament approves a regulation bill, he's going to sign it into law, and he'll create he would support an amnesty for any kind of like non-violent criminal offenders historically.
That's interesting. I mean, I think, again, you were talking about sort of the commercial opportunity, really. And what does that mean for you guys in terms of what you're doing at Herbology Ventures? And, you know, how are you kind of embracing these new opportunities as they're happening?
Well, I mean, this is great. You know, this is what everybody in Europe has been waiting for decades, right? Let's be honest. Where you can have, if it moves forward somewhere in the framework that has been proposed, where you can, you know, people can come out of the shadows. The people who are growing now, you know, and only reporting half the income can actually just pay their taxes, and it will. So there's some minor economic improvements that are possible, but what's really good is that it gives the opportunity for businesses to do things the right way, and to kind of do away with the stigma, like what happened with medical cannabis in the last 10 years in Europe. Get rid of the stigma and say, here we're producing these products, they're legal, and here's the right way to approach it. And then it will enable all the market participants to speak directly to, you know, the general population about real risks and perceived risks. Because right now they're all lumped into one bucket, and everybody's a loser. But if there's opportunity for kind of strictly regulated commercialization, it can unlock not only, you know, economic stuff, but it will really improve usage patterns. But it can also be great for like cannabis, you know, product makers, innovation, to have a market where it doesn't have to be this dried flower forever. That's what it's going to be all over Europe. It's just like dried flower, and then like go ahead and smoke it, you know. But now you're going to be able to have more refined product types, which will create an opportunity for persons or entities, whether they're European or Canadian or West, who want to come in and bring, you know, sophisticated products that are selling like hotcakes in California or British Columbia, bring those to Europe so people can then have a better experience, you know, aren't going to be coughing because you'll have all the different dosage forms, so on and so forth. Of course, the devil's in the details. And if this does happen, then there'll have to be a secondary round of local ordinances and additional regulation on secondary laws, you know, what is impacted by this. So we'll see exactly how it plays out, but it creates an opportunity. And for people who are already involved historically with cannabis in Europe, this is a great opportunity. So we're watching with a laser focus, ready to, you know, try to act in a win-win-win kind of way.
Absolutely. No, I think there's so much that could happen. There's so much that will happen. It's just really, it feels like, well, which direction will it kind of take? And, you know, what do we have to kind of circumnavigate first in order to kind of get to this end point? It's almost like when you see those puzzles and you have so many different, it's like, which way will it go first? Which will get to the end result? And they might all do that, but it feels very convoluted. But again, when, you know, the more you hear about what's happening in sort of smaller countries, you know, I mean, I guess the Czech Republic, I guess, isn't small by, you know, comparison to somewhere like Luxembourg or something like that. But again, compared to Germany, it feels very much like, well, you know, we've got our own plans, we've got our own things that we're doing, and it's only a matter of time. And it makes sense to be watching everyone else closely and thinking, okay, what is the kind of current broader kind of political appetite for these things, and what do people want to do? You know, you mentioned around kind of the new product categories and, you know, maybe gummies and beverages. I could see that here in the UK, it would really take off. That's what people are calling out for. And what do you have in the absence of there being a kind of legal alternative? You have these very kind of questionable quality and potency kind of things. So again, it just comes back to the argument that, you know, we can have nice things if we do things properly, but at the same time, it's like there needs to be that kind of first, you know, move that somebody needs to make. And it's never that straightforward, that's for sure. But no, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So no, thanks very much for joining us, Sean. Really appreciate your insights. So,
stay tuned, everybody, later this year, as we get closer towards the end of the year for developments here. It could be exciting and could potentially be the domino that starts it all in Europe.
That's it. We wait with bated breath. Thank you very much. We'll catch you soon. Take care.
Have a good day, everybody.